Martin Jones, 2000, surveyed 3 decades of research on such interactions between students, and between students and teachers. She observed that bilingual classroom talk is best understood within the context and traditions of that school and class. Such situations provide clues and cues for expected and allowable patterns of talk. For example, code switching by the teacher may be used to signal the start of a lesson or a transition in the lesson, to specify an interaction with a particular student, or to move from teaching content to classroom management. Children also initiate code switching in the classroom, and have an influence on a teacher's use of 2 or more languages, and particularly the languages used in small group work and conversations with other students. The student's choice of which language to use and when tends to be reasonably regular and patterned and will reflect 1. The teacher's declared preference and management of languages, 2. A student's and peer group's proficiency or choice, or 3. A negotiation between teacher and child. A teacher's language choice tends to be more child-centered in the early years of schooling, for example when explanations, clarifications and checks on understanding are needed with young children, e.g. language minority children in mainstream, language majority classes.
Teacher professional development can be designed to help all staff members effectively serve all students. For example, professional development programs can sensitize teachers to students' language, cultural and racial backgrounds, increase their knowledge of second language acquisition and help develop effective curriculum approaches in teaching language minority students. De Mejia and Ellert, 2015. All teachers can be trained to recognize themselves as teachers of language, irrespective of their subject area. The mentoring of new teachers by more expert and experienced teachers can be valuable. Such initial and in-service staff development may include student, community and wider societal awareness programs. Models and curriculum approaches to bilingual education, cultural diversity, and the politics that surround local and regional implementation of education for bilinguals. Caballero, 2014. Fillmore and Snow, 2018, indicate particular teacher competencies that bilingual, and all, teachers need, based on their multiple roles as classroom communicators, educators, evaluators, citizens and socializers. They suggest that teachers need to know the basics of language form, e.g. phonemes, morphemes, regularity, lexicon, structure, dialects, academic English, spelling, and not just language functions and uses.
For a long time, certain literacy practices in non-dominant languages have been discouraged within schools with a stringent policy of English only in many countries in the world. Anything incompatible with the dominant or official discourse in such contexts is considered atypical and, as a result, unofficial voices are suppressed, and multivocality is silenced. On the other hand, English is seen as a weapon for self-actualization and social development, leading Pennycook 2008 to argue that English is always a language in translation, a language of translingual use. These views are in direct relationship with G's 2015 characterization of primary and secondary discourses, where he uses the term discourse to mean ways of being in the world, that is more than just language, but ways of displaying membership to particular social groups. Therefore, it is not uncommon to hear non-native speakers of English indicating that they live in a linguistic duality in English-speaking countries, whilst English, the secondary discourse, is the language of schooling, the individual's mother tongues, or primary discourse, are used in other settings or communicative situations within their own linguistic communities. Since individuals move from home to school, they move from familiar domestic worlds which are part of their primary socialization to take on other identities, ways of behaving, and ways of using language.
The status of English as a lingua franca brings with it a series of connotations that considers language as a commodity to access symbolic goods, aiding individuals' self-actualization, to positions denouncing that English encourages the displacement of minority languages and their corresponding literacy practices. Philipson, 2013. This latter view sees English as a form of cultural colonization which imposes dominant alien values and practices over non-dominant groups. The inability to use English has been a debate in the United Kingdom as well as in other English-speaking countries where people who are not competent in the dominant language are, by far, singled out as illiterate, an assumption that does not take into consideration that those individuals may be literate in one, or maybe more, languages. The teaching of English to speakers from different linguistic backgrounds in a cross-cultural context, as Pennycook, 1994, argues, is not simply teaching language facts, but teaching a way of living and a mode that can subvert their native identities.
Schools and classrooms are highly complex organizations. They are sites where there are a multitude of actions and reactions, inputs and processes, variables and changing environments, and differing local, regional and national expected learning outcomes, targets and outputs. The formula for success is never simple, partly as success is diversely defined and understood, and partly as perceived effectiveness varies across person, administration, region and time. Also, the mixture of factors affecting effectiveness is so complex that simple recipes are impossible. Effectiveness inevitably goes far beyond language medium and language outcomes, to embrace the full education of a student. Ultimately, effectiveness is about what is deemed best for the child and society, and not just for the future of a language. However, there is sufficient international research, grounded wisdom and accumulated expertise to make it possible to suggest key factors that need discussion and interpretation in effective bilingual schools and classrooms. This chapter attempts to provide a menu for that dialogue. Classroom activities to foster cross-cultural competence can include enacting social conventions, the presentation of cultural rituals and traditions using authentic visual and written materials, discussing cultural variations, e.g. the colorful kaleidoscope of Latin American dances, festivals, customs and traditions, identifying the varying experiences and perspectives of the particular language variety, e.g. of French Canadians, of the French majority in France, of bilinguals in France, e.g. Bretons, Provençal, and classroom visits by native speakers of the language for question and answer sessions. It is important for bilingual classrooms to go beyond the surface-level features of cultures, e.g. food, holidays, dance, traditional costumes, etc., to deeper understandings of how culture frames one's understanding of and interactions with the world, how culture is dynamic, and the complex and ever-shifting relationships between language, identity and culture, especially as experienced by bilingual students, Valdiviso and Nieto, 2015.